It's race win number 91 for Lewis Hamilton. He has equaled the great Michael Schumacher, and he seems to be on his way to clinch his 7th World Championship. What a race this was at the Eifel Grand Prix. Welcome to Pits To Podium. It's time for our usual post-race debrief, and there are quite a few talking points to speak about. When I'm joined here by Kunal Shah with me, who is a maestro in Formula One, essentially, a promising racing driver in the past, marketing manager for Force India, now working at Viasat Network in Norway as the head of the motorsport department. Here's one man who knows exactly what he's doing. And Kunal, so much happening here in Germany. Quite a few talking points, but not really the best of races, let's call it that way.
Frankly, we've been split in the studio here as well. Okay, whether it was an interesting race or not. And I just realized I didn't greet you as well as you greeted me and everyone else on the show. So hi to you again, Soumil. But, back to rating the race, I pretty much loved it because, there were parts in the race where we were all sitting in anticipation, waiting on the edge that something or the other is going to happen, which is pretty normal for Formula One, rather than literally sitting back and knowing nothing's going to happen. So I would say that anticipation was pretty high. I think the midfield battles were fantastic. A couple of battles on the opening lap were also really good. So in all, it wasn't entirely boring a race, I would say. At least that's my view.
Yeah, there were quite a few talking points, quite a few things happening. Of course, we expected Nurburgring as a circuit to deliver much more in terms of wheel-to-wheel racing, but there was a bit of that, which we shall come to. But Kunal, if you had to pick your Pits to Podium moment, and there were quite a few contenders for that, which one would it be? For me personally, I think it just has to be Bottas's retirement, because that was instrumental to the way the race panned out towards the end. What about you?
I mean, my Pits to Podium moment definitely has to be Nico Hulkenberg and Racing Point overall. I would say, Hulkenberg getting in only on Q1, being just 4 tenths away from Q2, less than a second, away from Perez, finishing in the points ahead of Kimi Raikkonen and, Sebastian Vettel. I think he's having a brilliant season as a super sub, and maybe that's what he should just be in his career, because his spikes are now far more evident when he's a substitute rather than when he was a Renault racer.
Exactly. And interesting enough, I've just got the stat sheet right here with me. And Nico Hulkenberg, as it stands, has scored a total of 10 points, which is only 7 behind Sebastian Vettel, although he's only raced in 2 races. Make of that what you will, folks. That's the case with Nico Hulkenberg right now, just coming in, stepping up and delivering all the time. I think he started, P number 20, and the kind of comeback that he has made was absolutely brilliant. And that's why we love Nico Hulkenberg. And funnily enough, Kunal, even Sergio Perez, who had a super, super good race today, along with Nico Hulkenberg, does not have a drive for 2021. And that's something that just is very bizarre to me. I can't make sense of it. And yes, we have, by this point, digested the fact that Sebastian Vettel has made his way into Racing Point, and Lance Stroll will keep that second seat. But it still stings you every single weekend when these guys just come up and put performances like this one.
Yeah, especially considering that, Racing Point is the only team to have scored double points, at Nurburgring. And the fact that both the drivers who raced for them and scored these points are up for grabs for 2021.
Yeah.
And that teams are still taking their time in picking them up, So lots of surprise points when it comes to, Racing Point this weekend and, their 2 drivers for 2021.
Exactly. Lance Stroll also not competing. So that's the reason why Nico Hulkenberg was drafted in. But let's actually keep the midfield battle aside for a couple of moments, because there is something much, much bigger to speak about at the very top. And I think let's start with the positives. I think let's begin by saying a big, big congratulations to Lewis Hamilton, who's equaled the record of Michael Schumacher. Now, drink it in. 91 Formula One victories. That is a lot. In fact, that's more victories than quite a few world champions have started races as a whole. And yes, you can say on one point, Formula One has had a big, big calendar for many, many years now. Lewis Hamilton being in the best car has benefited from all that. But still, winning 91 Grand Prix is something outrageous. And full credit to Lewis Hamilton for that. The way he's handled it, the way he's managed it, top notch. I think he's well and truly a modern legend now. And he's on his way to a 7th World Championship, Kunal. And a big factor for that would be that Bottas has had a DNF here.
Yeah, I think, Lewis has shown us how you were able to elevate yourself even with every passing season. And, as a driver, as a talent, as a personality, we keep saying how he's in the best car and so on. But, consistently, he's been able to show that despite being in the best car, he's still the best driver out there. And I think as of this moment, he also leads the World Constructors Championship after the
Yeah.
2020 Eifel Grand Prix. And bits and pieces about Lewis's talent were also on display for his 91st win. So his opening lap aggression and almost taking the lead from Valtteri Bottas. And most impressively was him at the restart. People were expecting Max Verstappen to pounce onto him and do something outrageously fun and probably grab the lead. But Lewis was like
Yeah.
a couple of car lengths ahead than what even Max would have liked for himself. So all in all, fantastic 91 races and wins, I would say, for Lewis. And I'm pretty sure he's going to add at least another 20 more. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe we can place a bet. When Lewis Hamilton hangs up his helmet, how many race wins do you think he's going to have to his name?
That's a good question, right? So I'm going to be thinking out loud for this one. 2021, I think, is already in the bag, even before the year has begun. You may call me a bit too pessimistic about Red Bull and Bottas's chances, but I think Hamilton at this stage is just untouchable. So that's 2022. We're going to have around 20 odd races. So even if Lewis wins around 11, and I think I'm going for 125. I think I'm going to go for 125 or 120 or something thereabout. What about you, Kunal?
I was going to say 120 as well, So we have 29 races at least where we're going to see Lewis Hamilton stand on the top of the podium. And, there are lots of people thinking he's dominating, he's boring, and the sport is suffering and all. But the truth being that it's best to embrace what he's able to do
Hmm.
against different talents, against different challengers. He's at Rosberg, he's at Vettel, he's at Verstappen, he's at Leclerc. Of course, I'm only talking in the recent era that's there. But he's been able to rise up to the challenge and consistently sort of perform better than most of his rivals to get to where he is today. So it's hats off to Lewis Hamilton, or helmets off to Lewis Hamilton.
Indeed, what a performance. And the most heartwarming thing from that was Mick Schumacher coming in and presenting Lewis Hamilton. I think, was it a race one crash helmet? Whatever. Michael Schumacher's helmet from his time at Mercedes. And that was something so special. I just saw that moment and felt, wow, man, this is why you watch sports in the very first place. And Mick could be here fighting Lewis next year in Formula One too. So just adds a little bit of spice to all that thing. But yeah, very good performance by Lewis. But I have to say I am gutted for Valtteri Bottas. I don't think it was any fault of his own. Of course, you can't fault Valtteri Bottas for a part breaking on his car, can you? And just him losing power at the wrong time. I mean, there was a feeling that Valtteri Bottas, although he lost the lead through that lockup at turn number one, he could have come back stronger because he just seemed to have that X factor with Lewis here this weekend, but didn't work out eventually. And from the looks of things, it's just blown away. Every single week we come here on the Pits to Podium show and we always discuss the same thing. Championships heading towards Lewis Hamilton now more than ever, in fact.
Yeah, I mean, it was a rare mistake from Valtteri Bottas, I would say. I mean, usually his mistakes have been at the start of the race, to be
Yeah.
very frank, but a rare mistake while he's been leading, especially so comprehensively. I loved how, he sort of struck back and took the lead away from Lewis Hamilton. I don't know if his braking error had anything to was sort of triggered by the power unit issues he faced or not. Again, it's just a question I'm asking. We will know in the couple of days to come. But truth be told, yes, he lost it all by himself. At least from what we saw into turn one, seemed like a simple, very outbreaked himself sort of an error. And Lewis, being Lewis, was just waiting, and that's what he was piling the pressure onto Valtteri for. So unfortunate. I think the gap is going to be insurmountable. Now it's going to be a question of how soon before Lewis Hamilton can sort of wrap up the 2020 Formula One World Championship.
He's already got a gap of around 70 odd points to Valtteri Bottas at this stage, and we still have more races to come. And I think it's just going to be a proper Lewis Hamilton steamroll show. And I know that's not good for the competition. I know it just makes the sport a lot more predictable. But again, you don't fault Sir Alex Ferguson for dominating, right? He's just doing his job. Lewis Hamilton, just like them, is doing his job. And he is proving time and again why he is so good. But there is also another person, another driver, who came in and showed why he was rated so highly. Formula One's forgotten A-lister, that's what I like to call him, Daniel Ricciardo, getting a podium with Renault. And it must be so sweet for him because he's been trying so hard with this team. It's just not happening. They didn't really have the pace last year. This year, things seem to be better. Of course, he's leaving for McLaren next year, but leaving with that one podium trophy might just be so satisfying, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It's great to see Renault's podium in, after their, I think, umpteenth return to Formula One be scored finally, given all the jokes around Cyril Abiteboul and the tattoo that's now going to come. And, given that there were so many top drivers retiring, so Alexander Albon had his own, issues in the race, Valtteri Bottas had his issue, we saw Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, so, lots of regulars having issues, and that sort of, made an early assessment that we could have a surprise podium finisher, and who better than, Daniel Ricciardo.
Yeah.
Although I'm a bit disappointed he didn't do the shoey when he sort of should have done it the most, okay? But the second point also being, and I know we will talk about it later, was, with so many drivers retiring, we would have seen surprise point scoring for a couple of drivers, which we saw, in this race as well. So in all, fantastic to see Daniel Ricciardo there, given how he sort of left Red Bull to try and pursue something else elsewhere. This sort of shows that his talent is still intact, even more so given the craze that F1 teams right now have to keep signing younger drivers time and again. So, it just shows that in his 30s, he's still as good or probably even better than some of the youngsters who are doing the rounds around these Formula One circuits in these racing cars.
I think it reminds me a lot of Fernando Alonso's stint in the late 2000s with Renault when he left McLaren, of course, a championship winning team, to spend 2 really, really bad years with the French team. At that stage, Alonso was a 2-time Formula One world champion. He had nothing to prove. And he goes to a midfield team, and that was I think the first of 2 times in his career when he just had to drag a bad team to really good results. And as a driver, that is something that builds you up so much. Must be frustrating. You will get white hair a bit early on in your life, but it's something that really braces you for a really good time. And when Alonso came back to Ferrari, he was a driver unlike anyone else. I expect something similar with Danny Ricciardo. I expect something similar with Charles Leclerc as well when Ferrari comes back to form. So it should be fun. There's lots of things to look out for, but indeed, it's really satisfying to get that one big podium after spending 2 years not really getting anything at all and just filling up your bank account, let's call it that way. But Ricciardo aside, also, Kunal, our prediction was slightly misjudged. We said that Racing Point will be the best of the rest, but nevertheless, double points for them. Sergio Perez finishing in P number 4. Nico Hülkenberg coming home to score points after starting 20th. Not bad.
I think Racing Point, phenomenal race out there. Double points, the only team to have scored that too with super sub Nico Hülkenberg, like we spoke about. Perez was a little bummed that the late race safety car sort of cost him. At least he believes it cost him the podium. A chance of the podium. He sort of kept the old tires going while everyone else pitted. So it was supposed to be a classic, Sergio Perez tire management call that they would have made. But that sort of makes me question, about the late race safety car. Firstly, Norris did a good job of parking it right on the outside where, he wouldn't disrupt the proceedings. So maybe could Formula One have done with a virtual safety car? Again, it's just a question. It's not a suggestion. The FIA knows safety far better than pretty much all of us do who don't work for the FIA. The other question which I had, which I'm going to do a bit of digging on, is was the safety car actually a little slower than usual? Because you saw Hamilton, you saw Verstappen, and these drivers were on the radio saying, okay, they need to go, the safety car needs to go faster. So I don't know why the safety car was slow, so to say. Was it slower than it usually is at the other races? who dictates the eventual pace of the safety car, as in apart from it just being Bernd Maylander, is he sort of given a target time to go and follow? One doesn't know. I'm going to go and do a bit of digging, but I do feel maybe the safety car could have come in a little, couple of laps earlier. Maybe would have got more laps to go racing, but all in all, I think we're all celebrating a Ricciardo result, or Ricciardo being on the podium is a more celebratory result, I would say. Even more so, given that Renault haven't had the best performing package in medium to high downforce configuration circuits, and that's the step forward that they've been wanting to take since a couple of seasons.
I think let's scratch the surface a bit deeper on. That's a very good point that you mentioned about the safety car. And Lewis Hamilton was vocal about it. He said lots of things on the team radio. He said this should be going faster. It's not correct. It's not safe enough. And he may have just got a point there because, of course, you want your tires to be warm. Soft compound tires, we know they take just a little bit less, of course, to warm them up because they're softer rubber. You can get them to work a bit early on. But nevertheless, you're racing at really high speeds. Nurburgring was cold. And it was properly cold out there. We may not have had the clouds and the rain and all that, but it was still pretty chilly. So does he have a point with the safety thing, Kunal? Was he correct on that? And I think with the FIA, there was just a bit of a compromise that they had to make, right? Do we go with the competitive side of things or do we go for the more spectacle side of things? I mean, it just takes my mind back to the USA where you have competition cautions in NASCAR races just to bunch people up. Now, this wasn't a pre-planned caution. Obviously, there was an incident that led to that, but perhaps I just felt that the FIA needed something to spice this race up. And no, the FIA does not dictate races. I may sound like an absolute idiot for saying this, but you just have to think of the spectacle at times.
You do, but I personally don't think the FI necessarily thought of a spectacle, like you said. I think it was just one of those safety calls. And, when it comes to safety, it's better to err on the side of caution. And maybe that's why they realized that, okay, instead of 11 laps under the green flag towards the end, it's going to be 10 laps towards the clean flags at the end. So, good questions to keep asking, but we'll never sort of get to getting the true answer out there. But, like we keep doing, we will keep asking the questions with the hope that, at some point we're all able to find out what the truth behind these so-called interesting calls were.
Absolutely. I'll tell you another thing that was really true. Romain Grosjean scored points today. Romain Grosjean, after being hit by gravel on his finger in the opening lap by Kimi Raikkonen, who we shall come to later on, he fought all the way through the race and finished up in P number 9. I think the first time that Haas has scored points this year. So that's a big result for him. And I think that just makes it 9 out of 10 teams scoring points this weekend, Kunal.
Yes, 9 out of teams scoring points, which is phenomenal. Actually, Haas's second scoring point. Yes. I think you meant Grosjean's first point for the season.
Yeah. My apologies.
Yes, and this means that the two Williams drivers are the only ones to have not scored points up until now in the season, and it'll be good to see if they are able to sort of sneak into the points at some point. But Grosjean did a medium hard strategy. I believe he didn't pit under the safety car that came out, and that sort of gave him track position, and then he held his ground against Giovinazzi at that point, and he just made the most of the track position that he had. But it's good to see him in the points, given all the criticism and the trolling that usually follows him, I would say. Giovinazzi as well, I think he did a soft medium stint, and that in itself is great to see him score points, especially when he's always under fire with talks that Kimi might stay on and then Mick might just take his seat. And talking about Kimi Raikkonen, 323 races, but not the best of races or the cleanest of races for him.
Where do we begin? So I think let's start with the opening lap, as we shall. Kimi Raikkonen going slightly wide, spraying up some gravel, and Romain Grosjean saying, "Oh, my finger," because that gravel just really hit him on hard in the hand. Who knows what the damage is like? Of course, they'll be going in and doing their extensive research about that now. Then Kimi Raikkonen, I think the most subtle way of saying that would be, did a China 2019 with George Russell, just missed his braking, had to brake a bit late. Snap oversteer, and the next thing you know, George Russell is flipped over. Not completely, of course. His car went slightly wide and came back down to earth and came crashing down to earth, that is. So Russell had to retire because of that as well. And then Kimi Raikkonen got the penalty, but crazy day. Crazy day for Kimi. And
Yeah.
not the best way to celebrate a big milestone, let's call it that way.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, not the best way to even remember the legend of Kimi Raikkonen, I'd say.
Yeah.
And maybe George Russell could have scored a point. Who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
if Grosjean and Giovinazzi could get in, maybe Williams would be kicking themselves, hoping that had the incident not happened, maybe George Russell could have scored points. But there was one driver who actually had an even worse race than Kimi Raikkonen, and I think that was Alexander Albon.
Oh, yeah.
I made a note of everything that he did that was sort of not so good, not so Albon-like or Red Bull-like. I think he had a bad start, and he clipped Daniel Ricciardo. Then yeah, he was he had some really hard fights with the Alpha Tauri drivers, and his radio message was a little too endearing. They always fight me so hard, and then he had issues with Kvyat, and he had issues with Gasly as well while they were fighting, and then he eventually retired from the race. It was a very strange retirement, and I think he's also got 2 penalty points on his license. So not so great a race for him, especially given that Pierre Gasly once again finished P6, and Gasly actually was the only driver to have used all 3 tire compounds in the race. So he started on the mediums, went to the hards, and then ended it on the softs.
The Gasmobile is on fire once again, and what do I say about Alex Albon? It just felt, and I know the power unit issue was the official reason why Alex Albon retired, but midway through the race, once he got the penalty, it just feel like, okay, Alex, you're done, son. That's your playtime over. Come back into the home. Just a sad way to end the race for him. Very bizarre for the time, because exactly when the penalty was announced, that is exactly when Albon came in and just put the car back in the garage. But no, the official word is that it's an engine problem. So we'll believe it. We'll think it's an engine problem. Okay, nevertheless. But no, tough weekend for him, also making contact with Danny Kvyat. And that's one observation that my dad made while we were watching the race. It's just that Alex Albon makes moves and he has a lot of intent. And I surely agree with that. That's one thing that separates him with Pierre Gasly at Red Bull. But it's almost like Alex Albon misses out on knowing where the other car is. And we've seen that a couple of times with Hamilton. We've seen that early on this season as well. We've seen this same thing with Pierre Gasly today as well. Is that just a sense of a lack of awareness? And I know it's very easy saying this sitting in a quiet little apartment just shooting a video, but no, it just is happening time and again. Alex Albon just on the exit, just losing track of the other car and making contact eventually.
I think that's a great observation by your dad. So it's nice to get a perspective, and maybe that's he's a little overeager just when a move is done, because he knows he's constantly needing to prove a point, and there's a bit of confidence that he needs to keep portraying time and again. So that's a great observation, I'd say, and it doesn't look good even more so when Verstappen is able to keep up with the Mercedes. And let's remember, there was a point of time before the safety car that Hamilton and Max Verstappen were a minute ahead of P3. And, Albon was nowhere near P3 or, further. He was actually even further down the road than the minute out there. So, one would understand if, Hamilton and Max were a minute ahead, and Albon was, say, 20 seconds behind them, and then 40 seconds behind were the others. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case to be for him. And it always, these things, sort of stand out that much more when you see Pierre Gasly, like I said, do so good in the Alpha Tauri.
Kunal, very briefly, I think let's touch up upon this for a minute or two. Where to next for Red Bull? Because Max Verstappen, as you mentioned, keeping up with Lewis Hamilton and getting the fastest lap in the end as well. So kudos to him for that one. But Alex Albon, as you mentioned, symbolically nowhere to be seen. And that's a perpetual problem now. They've had 2 candidates in that car. They are backing Alex Albon, but it just doesn't look right.
I think they will just wait out the season and they'll see how it goes, I'd say. I mean, it's one thing for all of us to say, hey, Gasly going to Red Bull, big difference. And that's the obvious step forward that he would prefer in his career, getting a supposedly faster car. But you never know if Gasly might just go there and get psyched out again by the fact that it's a Max Verstappen team out there. So
Yeah.
lots of variables at play, I would say. And maybe Red Bull have probably realized that being a little more patient with their drivers could sort of help them extract better. Or they might just finally say Gasly becomes the number one driver at AlphaTauri. Max remains number one driver at Red Bull Racing. Anyway, they've sort of treating AlphaTauri as a sister team instead of a junior team, and then maybe they get the likes of say a Perez or a Hulkenberg, to partner Max Verstappen alongside at Red Bull Racing.
And would be interesting. That would be really interesting because you need credible point scorers. And we've seen Perez and Hulkenberg consistently go out there and deliver. Hulkenberg, in fact, in a car that he does not even know so well. So that's something rather extraordinary. It remains to be seen what Red Bull does with this. Naturally, they would prefer going to the younger talents, and I would do the same because you have Yuki Tsunoda, Yuri Vips, Jehan Daruvala waiting in the wings. But let's see how they go about with that. And I think the last big observation that we can take back from this race, Kunal, is that the reliability was exceptionally poor today. It just reminded me of Formula One races back in the 80s where everyone just seems to have an engine problem.
It did, and a bullet tank proof reliable engine like Mercedes's sort of went down, and we had a failure with Mercedes, we had a failure with Renault, we had a failure with Honda. The only power unit manufacturer that didn't have a failure was Ferrari, which again, stands out. I think a couple of races ago, we had a similar situation as well.
Yeah.
And Charles Leclerc, qualifying P4, finishing P7, some great battles. I think he did well in the last stint to keep Nico Hulkenberg sort of behind. And, it's a little unfortunate that given so many issues in a race, Sebastian Vettel in the second Ferrari is just unable to pick up any points. Of course, he picked up one spin, which is pretty standard for Sebastian every couple of races. And I really hope that he's able to sort of shed this image the minute he moves to Aston Martin next year.
There's a word for that. There's a word in the internet meme community or the internet Formula One community, call it what you want. It's holy, it's sacred, it's something that has been put up on a pedestal, and I'd love to say it with a bit of drum roll. It is Spinala. Yeah, there's some sort of a charm in that word that makes it feel very offensive. And no, on a genuine note, Sebastian Vettel, it's very sad to see him in a situation like that. Again, Esteban Ocon also having problems. So he was not the only second driver of the team to have major issues. But very, very quickly, Kunal, I think that's the last thing that we can discuss is why do we have such big gulfs in the team? Why do we have Max Verstappen just having a huge, huge gap to, say, someone like Alex Albon, and Charles Leclerc having a huge gap to Sebastian Vettel, who is, as we know, a four-time world champion? Is it something to do with the atmosphere of the team that comes up into perspective? Is it just the car itself? And normally that's one thing that people on WhatsApp groups would love to say, hey, the car is rigged to favor one driver. But no, is it really that way?
I mean, personally, it's something I would break down into several variables. The first being obviously, driver talent and driver attitude towards a lot of approaches. Two different personalities seeing the same problem differently, reacting to the same problem differently. We've heard several times before, this driver needs a perfect car to deliver a perfect lap, and this driver can just take any car and deliver a near perfect lap. Those references that we've sort of all grown up to watching Formula One, I'd say. And then, of course, for a team, we're all humans. It's made out of humans, at least, up until now, before sort of robots take over and run F1 teams, I'd say. But it's natural for us to gravitate towards drivers who are sort of doing better, have a more affable personality, are driving the team forward. You see that they are making lesser excuses and, giving their very best. And, like we've said, that 2020 Charles Leclerc has been far more impressive than, say, the 2019 Charles Leclerc. And that's why, despite Ferrari being slow, we all feel really well each time, Charles is able to deliver a performance. And, performances like what he gave this weekend definitely stand out and will be sort of remembered in the time to come.
Indeed, it's been something very interesting, and there's a lot more of that to come, folks. There are many, many more races, so keep watching. And once again, Kunal, thank you so much for being a part of this one. It was a pleasure having you all watching and listening to this one, folks. If you liked it, you know what to do. Leave a like, share, and subscribe to Pits to Podium and also to the Inside Line Formula One podcast. As always, folks, this was amazing. And finally, just before we go, Kunal, what do you expect for the next race?
Well, my biggest expectation for the next race is, going to be what happens to P3 in the race, in the drivers' championship, and even in the constructors' championship. And I say this because despite Mercedes' dominance, P2 and P3 have always sort of battled, and it's not always been, a Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen podium, much as, one would believe that's the easiest to predict. Likewise, for the drivers' championship, could Verstappen, take P2 and relegate Valtteri to P3 in the championship? And the most interesting, then, of course, being P3 in the constructors' championships. We've seen McLaren, Renault, and Racing Point, all literally a couple of points here and there from each other, battling for P3. And let's remember, P3 and the constructors' championship is the business of Formula One. So the teams would be needing all they can to sort of keep ahead, make that much more money. And just a reference. So, when the race was over and Checo Perez was told, "Great news, Checo, you're P4," one of the first things he asked was, "Where did Nico finish?" Because he knows just how important the fight in the Constructors' Championship is. And, of course, this is despite the fact that he's going to be leaving the team at the end of the season.
If you're a Formula One team watching, see, you know that Checo Perez is a team player as well. So get him on. What are you waiting for? He does not deserve to have no seat for 2021. I desperately hope, I beg your pardon, that he gets one. But on the whole, folks, I'm sure that you're too excited for the next one as well. I think we've got Portimao next, right? We're going to Portugal for the first time in ages. So should be a fun one. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, folks. And we shall see you in the midweek as we discuss the next Grand Prix. See you then, folks. Goodbye and good night.
Thanks, Soumil, and see you guys.